Good morning, everyone. My name is Carolyn Hart Bennett, and today I'm going to read you all of Chapter 5 in my book, Seven Sisters, The Voyage. The news of the shark attack spread quickly. Some wrote about it in their journals. I witnessed a horrible sight this morning at the funeral of Sister Esther Devereaux. Her death and burial at sea were of little comfort to her family. Death is so final, yet there is hope in the resurrection. Jane Clotworthy had now replaced her mother as Eleanor's main concern. Her husband Hugh and Father Thomas were also very worried about her mental state. The rest of the saints knew she was sick because everyone remembered to include her in the prayers that were given in the morning and evening prayer meetings. After 2 days of moping and sadness among the saints, President Bramwell called an all-company prayer meeting. After the song and prayer, President Bramwell spoke a powerful sermon about death, Christ's atonement, and the resurrection, giving everyone a needed lift from the sorrow they felt after the tragedy of Sister Devereaux. Brothers and sisters, let us return our thoughts to our life here on the Amazon. I want to make an announcement that if any of you can sing, we'd like you to lend your voices to the choir. And if Brother Careless tries to recruit you, I hope you will be willing and eager to join him. We cannot let his tremendous talent go untapped on this voyage. Brother Careless's face flushed a bit as he stood up. Thank you, President. We'll be practicing every afternoon at 2 bells on the foredeck, and I am pleased to announce that Brother William Fowler has composed a new hymn that was published in Liverpool just 2 weeks before the Amazon sale. We will be debuting it at our first concert. I'll let Brother Fowler tell you a little more about it. I wrote this hymn in honor of our beloved founding prophet, Joseph Smith, began Brother Fowler. It is called We Thank Thee, O God, for a Prophet. It also pays honor to President Brigham Young, and of course to all the prophets who will follow him. That will be wonderful, said President Bramwell. We'll look forward to hearing it. And now I think we will cut our meeting short this evening and give you an opportunity to promenade the deck for a while before you retire. The wind has calmed down from being so contrary this afternoon, and the captain predicts that the sunset will be spectacular. On deck, Titus and his cronies were gathered around Griswold, who was at the helm. They were making idle talk and smoking their pipes when they noticed their territory was being invaded by saints who came pouring up from the hatchways. The crew was used to a few passengers on deck after the prayer meetings, but not the whole company at once, and they were resentful of having their private time interrupted. I thought they'd all be tucked into their berths by now, scowled Griswold. I'd like to tuck some of them in, leered Alfie as he spied Lizzie stepping on deck. The crew laughed raucously. It was indeed a lovely evening as couples, families, and young people began strolling around the deck, oblivious to any disdain from the crew. They enjoyed the mass of dazzling colors that were splashing across the sky. The rays of the sun changed from gold to pink to orange and then to red. It was as if the saints were looking through a kaleidoscope that was changing designs every few minutes. Everyone admired God's handiwork. 3 different groups of saints on 3 different parts of the deck sang 3 different hymns. The Welsh saints were one of the groups, singing away in Welsh. It all blended remarkably well. These saints just break into song for no reason at all, griped Jabez. Have you ever seen so many smiling, singing simpletons, groused Titus with an exaggerated smirk on his face. They seem sickeningly happy, chimed in Griswold. Alfie joined with his jab. Being ignorant has its advantages. Yes, fools come in boatloads, scoffed Titus as his toadies roared. Susanna and the twins found a perfect spot on the bulwark to see the panorama of splendor before them. This is the beautifulest evening I ever saw, exclaimed Phoebe. The sun looks like a big ball of fire resting on the sea, marveled Susanna. They had never seen anything like this in Whittington. Then, when the sun started to disappear into the horizon, Fanny grew troubled. Oh, the sun is sinking into the ocean. It will be drowned, she cried with panic in her voice. Don't worry, it will come up again, said a young man standing slightly behind them. Are you sure? Questioned Fanny as she turned to see a tall, bespectacled missionary. I'm positive, he chuckled. Then he turned to Susanna. Sister Watts, would your father happen to be President Harold Watts from Whittington? Why, yes. Do you know him? I'm Elder Marcus Fielding. I was on a mission in Wales, and your father was my mission president. I worked with him in Wrexham, establishing a branch there. I remember seeing you at a zone conference for the traveling elders about a year ago," he said. "I'm sorry, but I don't remember you," she said. There were quite a few missionaries there. Just then, Matthew Geddes came running by and whacked Phoebe and Fanny on their arms. "You're it," he said, laughing as he ran to get away from them. "Come on, Fanny," Phoebe yelled. "Let's get him." And off they ran to play tag with several others. This left Susanna and Marcus alone together, causing them to feel a bit awkward at their sudden coupling. A few silent moments passed until Susanna realized that they had a mutual interest they could talk about, her father. "Papa wasn't home much," she said. "He walked 9 miles from Whittington to Wrexham and 9 miles back every Sunday and every Wednesday night." "Yes, I remember him wrapping his feet before he left for home," Marcus said. "He used to say, 'Blisters make you a man.'" And with that opening, Marcus and Susanna continued chatting and laughing about all the funny and spiritual experiences they had shared with her father. Finally, the sunset turned to dusk, leaving a deep glow that made everything look divine. Lizzie had casually wandered away from her sisters in the direction of the crew, as did several other young girls who were trying to get the sailors to notice them. She secretly hoped Alfie would come and talk to her again. At least she wanted to make sure he had the opportunity. Sure enough, he made his way over to her, and after a flirtatious greeting, they began talking and smiling, but tried not to draw attention to themselves. "So, how did a beauty like you end up with these Mormons?" he questioned. She knew he was trying to flatter her while putting down the Mormons at the same time, so she decided to be a little contrary. "Just fortunate, I guess. Don't you know there's a 40-foot wall around Salt Lake City, and they'll keep you there as a slave?" he said with a glint in his eye. "You've been listening to too many clergymen," she said. "All they ever did with my father was shake their heads in horror at the thought of him allowing me to leave England with those awful Mormons. But they never cared if we had any food to eat or clothes to wear when we lived in their parishes. They just make up those lies so they won't lose their congregations." "How can you be so sure? All you've got to go by is what your Mormon leaders tell you." She thought hard for a moment. "Well, I'm not too worried about it. I'll evaluate the performance when I get to New York." Rubbing it in, Alfie shot back. "Oh, I see. You joined for the free fare over. Is that it?" Undaunted, Lizzie pointed out. "Well, it is called the Poor Fund, and I can't exactly hire on as a member of the crew like you did." "I have some plans of my own when I get to New York," he said. "I've got me a commission as first mate to sail round the Horn to San Francisco to the gold fields. I want to try my hand at getting rich," he said, setting the bait. That sounds a little more interesting than walking 1,200 miles across the plains," she said laughingly. Eleanor was mentally taking roll of her sisters when her eyes settled on Lizzie and Alfie on the other side of the ship. She could see something was going on between them and knew she'd better put a stop to it. "Lizzie, come over here," she called. "We've got a meteor shower." Lizzie realized she had been discovered and needed to get back to her sisters. "I've got to go," she said. As she moved away from Alfie, he whispered, "Meet me on the boat deck at 11 bells. Lizzie was shocked for a split second. Then, not knowing whether to agree or not, she quickly moved to join the others, her heart racing with excitement. Caroline and Lavinia pointed at each meteor. "Look at that one," said Caroline. "It's winging its course across the sky, passing star and planet." As the meteor flew out of sight, Lavinia exclaimed, "And it's finally settled in the far west, the land of promise." Trying to be part of the scene, Lizzie chimed in, "What a magnificent sight." Then she stole a glance in Alfie's direction as he began climbing the ratlines. He was a magnificent sight, she thought. The conversation between Susanna and Marcus became easier and more natural as they laughed and watched the stunning light show in the heavens. They had finally graduated from talking about her father to many other topics, and they were getting along so splendidly that it occurred to Marcus that he might want to take advantage of this incredibly romantic night. As he stood at the bulwark, Marcus looked around the sky and suddenly pointed in the other direction. "Now the moon is coming up over there. We're having one impressive scene after another," exclaimed Susanna as they walked to the other side of the ship to get a better look. "I've never seen such a full moon." Marcus ventured. Do you like poetry, Sister Watts? Why, yes, Susanna said sweetly. Do you know some? I write poetry all the time. It just comes into my mind. I wrote a poem about the moon on Bear Lake by our homestead in Idaho. The moon tonight looks just like it did that night I wrote it. I'd love to hear it, Susanna purred. You see how the moon is casting its reflection on the water? It almost looks like rungs of a giant ladder. Yes, I see them, Marcus began. With idle oars and lazy thoughts, alone adrift at eventide, I watch, he corrected himself, we watch the moon wheel down its course until it dips its nether side. The quiet waves, like rolling glass, have each a rung for fancy's shoon. He took her hand. And hand in hand, we trip along a golden ladder to the moon. That's lovely, said Susanna. Then she demurely withdrew her hand from his. This beautiful, albeit awkward moment was broken up when President Bramwell stepped to the king plank and announced, Brothers and sisters, I hate to end this wonderful evening on deck, but we're sure to have many more of them in the days ahead, and 5 a.m. does come early. So let's sing Abide With Me, 'Tis Eventide, and then thank our Heavenly Maker for all his creations and all of our many blessings. Brother Careless? George cued the congregation. Abide with me, 'tis eventide, the day is past and gone, the shadows of the evening fall, the night is coming on. During the first few lines of the song, Lavinia was overwhelmed with the beauty of the music, the heavens, and the ocean. She started to sing along, as she had in the past hymns, expecting to choke up and stop. But to her surprise, her voice was perfectly true to pitch as she sustained each note. Getting her confidence, she built her volume. This was the first time anyone had ever heard Lavinia sing, and her voice was glorious. The saints near her turned to stare, flabbergasted that such an amazing voice could come out of such a stern countenance. She was soon lost at the words. O Savior, stay this night with me. Behold, 'tis eventide. On the second verse, she was all but singing a solo as everyone marveled at the beauty of her clear and resonant voice. Not only were the saints enraptured, but the crew seemed to enjoy the music too. O Savior, stay this night with me. Behold, 'tis eventide. She sang a lot better than I did, by the way. During the prayer, the saints found themselves bowing their heads. Titus grew disgruntled as he watched this taking place. And I better start over on that. During the prayer, the sailors found themselves bowing their heads. Titus grew disgusted as he watched this taking place and stomped off to the sailors' quarters, swearing under his breath. After the prayer, the sisters and many saints gathered around Lavinia. We didn't know you could sing, said Eleanor. That was marvelous, exclaimed Caroline. Brother Careless was now pawing his way through the crowd. Sister Triblet, we would be honored to have you join the choir. I am astounded at your exceptional singing voice. I heard Jenny Lind at the Haymaker Opera House in 47, and you are every bit her match. I thought I was listening to an angel. Lavinia was quite overcome with all this attention. Why, thank you, she said shyly. Then, feeling the need to explain, she added, I haven't been able to sing without crying since both my dear parents succumbed to diphtheria a year ago, this very week. But tonight, the scenery and music were just so heavenly that I felt their presence, and I was able to control my tears. Whoopsie daisy, sorry about that. Okay. I felt their presence, and I was able to control my tears. Then, turning to George, she announced, Yes, Brother Careless, I'd love to sing in the choir. As the saints prepared for bed, everyone talked about the evening beauty they had just experienced. They were euphoric as they settled down to their berths. Soon the slow rolling and tilting of the ship, along with the celestial scenes in their minds, hypnotized them, and they drifted into sweet slumber. Lizzie, however, was feeling something far different from the rest. Her heart was racing, and she felt perspiration on her forehead as she clutched her covers and bit her lower lip. She was hoping everyone would slip into a deep sleep before the next bell was sounded on deck. She worried a little that she wouldn't hear it, but she knew there was no chance of falling asleep the way she felt. Being on the outside of the three-person berth, located a short distance from the hatchway, she would have to be stealthily to make it past the berths between her and the stairwell. Her heart leaped to her throat when the first bell sounded. Each toll tapped her nerves with excitement as she looked to see if anyone was stirring. No one was. 8, 9, 10, 11. Easing to the edge of the berth, she swung her legs over the edge and moved her frame down without putting her feet on the berth below. Her arms were able to hold her steady as she inched her way down to touch the floor. She stood still for a moment, looking around to see if anyone had noticed her, and then took a step. "What's the matter?" asked Caroline groggily as she opened her eyes to see Lizzie standing there. Lizzie froze in place, then tried to act nonchalant. "Nothing's the matter. I'm just going to the chamber pot." Satisfied with this answer, Caroline turned over and nestled down in her covers. Lizzie decided that moving slowly might bring more suspicion to her movements than she wanted to explain, so she quickly scampered over toward the chamber pot, which was in the corner just before the entrance to the hatchway. It was surrounded by makeshift walls of canvas to afford privacy, but instead of going into the enclosure, she cautiously continued up the hatchway. She stopped near the top and peered over the edge to locate the guards. 4 of them were patrolling the deck. She watched to see where their course took them. The 3 on the other side of the ship wouldn't be a problem, but the one coming towards her would. She ducked down as he approached her hatchway. Then, when she dared, she peeked up again and saw that he had executed his turn and gone the other direction. When he was safely 20 feet away, she sneaked out of the hatchway and ran to some nearby barrels where she crouched low and waited. When he turned the corner, she dashed behind the longboat and secreted herself there. Her chest heaved as she took breaths through her mouth and tried to calm down. She hoped the guards wouldn't hear her heart thumping, but of course, the din of the sailing ship obliterated any such imagined sound. When she thought she was safe, she looked around for Alfie. She was beginning to doubt the wisdom of this escapade. She would give him 2 more minutes and then was going to retreat. Straining to see in the darkness, she tried to identify the few sailors on deck. Where was he? She was starting to feel duped. Then, without any warning, a hand came from behind her and clamped over her mouth. "Shh! Not a sound." Lizzie yelped in fright and then realized it was Alfie. "Here, let's get into the longboat," he whispered as he lifted his hand from her mouth. A nervous smile crossed her lips as he helped her in. "I was wondering if you'd come," she said, staying low. "We could get into a lot of trouble." "Only if we get caught," Alfie teased. Lizzie was used to dishonest street rogues, but Alfie was different. He seemed to be genuine and was a real man's man. She could feel his strong muscles as he slipped his arm around her shoulder. She felt protected and safe as they cuddled down in the boat. "Why did you want to meet me?" Lizzie asked engagingly. "Why do you think?" questioned Alfie as he drew her to him and kissed her cheek. Lizzie felt a tingle. She liked it, but she wanted to stay on the subject. "No, really." Alfie could see he would have to earn her affection. "Because I like your company," he said with a smile, and then he started his persuasive tactics. "And I'm not so sure you fit in with these Mormons. You seem more streetwise than this puritanical lot." After a deep breath, Lizzie decided to confide in Alfie. "I've been on the streets earning a living since I was 10. We had a stall on Petticoat Lane, selling live poultry, ducks, geese, and chickens. That's where I first heard the Mormon elders during one of their street meetings." "Street meetings?" "That's where they get on a box and take turns preaching the gospel. I liked the sound of what they said. All the righteous gathering to Zion in America. Well, I'm glad you came with them because this trip would have been terribly dull without you," he said as he stole another kiss. Feigning displeasure, she scolded playfully. "You're certainly helping yourself to my lips without being invited." "That's because they're sweeter than wine, and I need another sip." He kissed her again with a passion that left Lizzie weak in his arms. She had to catch her breath as new sensations engulfed her body. Alfie knew she was ready for his proposition. "I have something that I want you to keep for me until we get to New York," he said, as he pulled out a small gold nugget from his pocket and gave it to her. "Blimey, is this pure gold?" she said, as she moved the sparkling object around in the moonlight. "Yes, my brother sent it to me from San Francisco." Lizzie was now more interested than ever in this intriguing new man in her life. She snuggled down on his shoulder and cooed, "Tell me more about San Francisco and the gold fields." At 1 o'clock, the next shift of guards came up the hatchway to relieve the 9 o'clock guards. Led by Captain Elijah Larkin, they went through the ritual they had practiced many hours while the Amazon was delayed in the English Channel. During the changing of the guards, there were questions asked, answers given, and sharp heel clicks and salutes, which were executed with precision. Elijah felt proud that his guards had learned their routines so well. He and his replacements would now patrol the ship until the trumpet sounded for the men to rise at 5 o'clock to scrape and scrub the lower decks. It wasn't too difficult for the guards to stay awake during their patrolling because of the 3 or 4 hours of sleep they had gotten beforehand, and the fact that they were marching around the deck and performing the ceremony of exchange each time they met another guard. Lizzie was having a wonderful time in the longboat, listening to Alfie talk about San Francisco and the riches there. As they lay together looking up at the heavens, Alfie pointed out different constellations and told her their names, as well as story after story of his adventures as a sailor. Lizzie laughed and smiled at his antics and daredevil escapades. After a while, Alfie asked a question that Lizzie didn't answer. He realized she had fallen asleep. That was all right. He was content to just hold her and stroke her hair. Soon the gentle movement of the ship lulled him to sleep as well. A few minutes slipped by. Then Captain Larkin decided to take a spin around the aft deck for a change of routine. He marched up the steps, and from this vantage point, he looked over the entire deck below. He could see his guards on either side of the ship, and he could also see into the longboat. What was this? He walked closer and peered over the side. Then, as loudly and commandingly as he could, he yelled, "You two get out of there! You know the rules about fraternization. You are not to be on deck after 9 o'clock p.m. Both Lizzie and Alfie were brutally jolted out of their sleep. With bleary eyes, they stood up and tried to collect their wits. "Sister Cornell, you need to get below," ordered Larkin. "Mate, I'll escort you to the captain." Alfie was fully awake by now and realized the predicament he was in, but he wasn't going to be told what to do by some Mormon scum. "The hell you will," said Alfie, taking a flying leap off the side of the longboat, knocking Elijah to the deck. There they scuffled until Alfie got the first good punch on Elijah's chin, which knocked him down, just long enough for Alfie to grab a nearby oar. "No, Alfie!" Lizzie screamed. This distracted Alfie momentarily, and when he brought the oar down, Elijah was able to roll out of the way. By this time, the other guards arrived and grabbed Alfie's arms, pulling him back. The noise of yelling and scuffling had aroused the captain and Mr. Huntley from their quarters. They were now on the scene, sizing up the situation. "What's awry? Who do we have here?" demanded the captain, looking at the sailor who was ducking his head. "Alfie?" Staggering to get up, Elijah announced, "I found him in the longboat with Sister Cornell." Letting this sink in, the captain realized he had to use his authority. "This will call for discipline. Confine him to his quarters, Mr. Huntley." Alfie's face fell. "What are you doing, Cap? You taking their side? Turning again your own?" Pretending to ignore Alfie, Captain Hudson apologized. "I'm sorry for this mishap, Captain Larkin." Then, to placate the guards, he added, "I'll determine an appropriate punishment tomorrow morning." "Take Sister Cornell below, Brother Brown," ordered Larkin to the guard standing nearby. "We weren't doing nothing," interjected Lizzie. "There's no need to punish Alfie. It was just a friendly conversation under the stars. What's the harm in that?" When the guard escorted Lizzie back to her berth, everyone was asleep except Eleanor, who had been awakened by their movement. "Lizzie, what happened? Are you all right?" she said. Wiping tears, Lizzie explained, "I went on deck to use the water closet and ran into Alfie. We were just talking a moment before I came back down. The guards made more out of it than there was." "That's an unlikely story," said Brother Brown, "when we found you both in the longboat together." "Well, we wanted to sit down to talk," Lizzie fibbed. "Thank you, Brother Brown," said Eleanor, weighing what she would do. "I'll take care of this." As the guard left, Lizzie felt unspeakable dread as she prepared herself for a lecture. She admired Eleanor so much. She couldn't bear to have her disdain. Eleanor studied Lizzie for a moment, then decided to put the burden of guilt upon her shoulders. "Lizzie," she said finally, "let's get some sleep." and she lay back down as if the incident were over and done with. Lizzie was incredibly relieved that Eleanor hadn't given her a tongue lashing, but she knew that Eleanor knew what had happened, and she worried that she might tell the other sisters. She didn't want to lose favor with them. Crawling into her berth, Lizzie stared into the darkness, thinking, scheming, and wiping tears as she turned the gold nugget over and over in her fingers. Because of the seriousness of the incident with Lizzie and Alfie, President Bramwell decided he needed to specifically target her and several of the other young girls who were disobeying the rule about fraternizing with the sailors. General announcements and prayer meeting didn't seem to be working. He made a list of names and gave it to his counselors, who went to the different wards and quietly rounded up half a dozen offending girls for a special meeting in the infirmary. Sisters, we have called you to this special meeting to emphasize that you must steer clear of the sailors on this voyage. They are Gentiles and have no concept of spiritual things, and who can only spell trouble for you if you get involved with them. They will break your tender hearts with promises they don't intend to keep. Please obey us in this counsel and avoid fraternizing with them. We have many young returning missionaries on this voyage who have strong testimonies of the gospel. It would better serve you to get acquainted with them. At least they have the standards that are desirable in a righteous husband. The crew may seem like attractive men, but they are of the world. You need to set your standards high to find a partner whose eyes are on the kingdom of God. We hope we won't have to talk to you again about this. President Bramwell studied the sisters to see their reactions. Most of the girls were red-faced and crying quietly. The message had sunk in, and they seemed repentant as they realized they needed to stay away from the crew. Lizzie kept her head down and tried to blend in with the rest, but she felt resentment building in her soul. These were adolescent girls. She was well into her 20s. She should be able to choose her own acquaintances. She was not convinced that there was anything wrong in her flirtation with Alfie. She had never gone by any rules in her undisciplined street life, and she didn't like restrictions now. Over and out. Till next time.